Good evening. What is going on in the world? There's a lot of stuff happening. Let's see. They just found some things underneath the pyramids. Did they find Gilgamesh's tomb UFOs? I mean, there's all kinds of weird stuff happening, right? So sometimes we look to the future to see what's going to happen. But we decided tonight we're going to look at now, all right? And we have Dr. Michael Lake to help us navigate our way through some of the things that are happening, and I think you guys are going to love it. So let's get into it. I'm really excited for tonight. Dr. Lake, welcome back to the show. We are delighted to have you again. It's wonderful. So welcome. And where do we start? I mean, there's so much to talk about.
Well, you look at all the different things that are going on, and I think God's making a major move, but I also think the enemy is too. Mm-hmm. And I think part of the challenge that we have is to have enough spiritual wherewithal to discern who's doing what. You know, you want to fight against the enemy, but the last thing you want to do is try to resist when God's trying to do something at the same time.
Yeah. Well, amen to that. Before the show, we were just discussing a few things, and you said you had a student that was in Iraq, and what did they find? Do tell us.
Yeah, it was, he calls me, and he was Special Forces, and he calls me sitting with a sat phone on Saddam Hussein's throne. And of course, back then, that was actually before I wrote the Shinar Directive, and he knew I was interested in these things. And he said, Dr. Lake, he said, you won't believe what happened. He said, the first thing that we did when we entered into Baghdad is we brought a archaeological team, and they went in to the ziggurat. You know, before the museum was raided, of course, we know all the different things they took, and a lot of the artifacts were never returned. He said they went straight for the ziggurat, and he said what I was told is that they were after the remains of Gilgamesh, and that kind of ties into what I have seen, and I've heard Steve Quayle and others talk about that. There seems to be almost a Indiana Jones versus the Nazis quest worldwide for Nephilim DNA, trying to gain access to triple helix type of DNA to try to augment humanity. And I thought it was interesting. God dropped that into my lap before I ever really knew, and began doing a lot of research into these things. And it's the more that I see it, and the more that I see what's going on, the more what we're seeing makes sense.
Dr. Lake, what do you think the four angels by the river Euphrates are guarding or protecting, or what are they doing over there, and what's going to be released at some point in time? Is that Nephilim or fallen angels or what?
I think that they're probably most likely watchers that were bound up. If you look at the Book of Enoch, I've always wondered that. And when they're released, they're not happy. Okay, they are not happy campers. And one of the things that I postulate is when you read the Book of Enoch, and they talk about how they were supposed to be in prison for so many generations. You take it back to the time of the flood, and you bring it forward, and they begin being released about the turn of the 20th century. And what's interesting is you have, at the beginning of the 20th century, people don't realize the U.S. almost shut down its patent department. They were under the impression that everything that could be invented had already been invented. And so there's no need for a patent office anymore. And all of a sudden, at that dawn of that, we begin having an explosion of technology. And I even believe that the Luciferians were prepping humanity for it, because they introduced eugenics, evolution, and spiritism in the previous 100 years before that. And it all came together in perfect harmony into Nazi Germany. And so, I mean, all this calculates together. So I think we've been having a progressive release of watchers since the turn of the 20th century. I think probably the four there at the Tigris Euphrates rivers are probably the last four to be released.
Oh, the last four. Oh, yeah. My.
And in my estimation, I could be wrong. One of the things I have pretty much decided about Bible prophecy, there's one section where they're quiet for 30 minutes in heaven, and there's dead silence, and so that all the prophecy teachers could all readjust their charts because we were all wrong.
Hey,
I think we have tried to interpret all things from a Greco-Roman mindset when it's a Hebraic book.
mm-hmm.
And within Hebraic thought, you have block logic. You can. I think the Book of Revelation actually repeats itself 3 times from different perspectives. And so I think that as we read and study these things, they're going to become. There's clarity is going to come as we see them come to pass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So before we started the show, Doug, Dr. Lake and I were talking about the fact that some of the artifacts came from, say, the Ishtar Gate came from Babylon, okay?
Yeah.
And the Pergamum Museum, the altar of Satan, came up from Asia Minor, from Pergamus. And so then it's in Berlin now, and there seems to be this darkness in Germany. When Carl Humann brought it up to Germany, there seemed to be an overall darkness that then fomented in World War I, okay? Because he would have brought them up from about 1878 to about 1901, and then they built the museum, and then they rebuilt it until 1932, which kicked off World War II. And they're talking about having it built again. And Dr. Lake, I'd like you to describe how they're moving things around, but it should be done in 2027, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what's interesting, you have both World War I, World War II happen when those 2 items are unified. One of the things I found out, I got to go to both sides of Berlin when I was in the military. And one of the things that the tour guide brought up was how that because of the war and everything, those things had been separated, and one was in East Berlin, one was in West Berlin. And so they were separating during the Cold War. And I have been holding my breath ever since the unification of Berlin and East and West Germany. I'm thinking, great, they got both pieces of the puzzle back together again. Satan's chocolate and peanut butter are getting ready to get together again. And I have been waiting for manifestations of that Nazi spirit to raise back up within Germany. And you mentioned earlier before the show that there was a stadium or a soccer game that they were actually worshiping Satan during the soccer game. Kaiser's
River, and I'm blanking on how you say that, Caesars, whatever in German, but basically they have a stadium there, and the Satanists got together and they manifested a pentagram, upside down, of course, with lights on it and things like that, and then they manifested a picture of Satan, a typical picture, with the horns and everything like that. And then they had Latin down below, and I asked Haller to help me with this and some other people, and I don't have the phrase in front of me right now, but it's basically opening the abyss and him taking their souls with them, with him rather. And so that's what they're conjuring right now. They're trying to manifest these fallen angels and open the portals.
When I was stationed in Germany from 1979 till about 81, out in Würzburg with 3rd Infantry Division. And one of the things that I discovered while I was there is that they have,
there it is.
Whether you're a licensed minister, whatever denomination, or you're a Wiccan or a witch, you have to register with the state. And in Germany, there were far more witches registered with the state than there were ministers. And many times you could look out over the valleys and at certain high satanic times and see their bonfires.
Well, what about, I'm sure you've researched this, Dr. Lake, as far as Operation Paperclip and all the Nazis that were brought over into America, certainly the rocket science and everything, but also I believe they infected other branches of our government since the late 40s and early 50s. Have you done much research into that?
Yeah, and that they brought their philosophy as well as the concept that you can channel these higher beings that will give you advanced technology, because that's actually where the Germans were getting the women of Vril. The only thing now we have taken the women out of the equation, in my theory, is that quantum computing is using quantum entanglement to communicate with watchers on the other side of the quantum barrier between here and Tartarus.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Lake, can a curse that's projected onto an artifact, let's say the Ishtar Gate or the Seat of Satan, can that curse come with the artifact when it moves. So if Berlin has those artifacts and other artifacts or figurines or gods, can the curse come along with it?
Yes, absolutely. Interesting about the Ishtar Gate. I was reading chronicles from one rabbi, and he was talking about when Judah was brought into captivity in Israel. And he said, we're taught to look for signs. And I can't remember now off the top of my head the exact number of dragons that are on the Ishtar Gate, but there is only one word in Hebrew that has the numeric value of that number, and it's Hades. That it is literally the gates of hell.
Would that be the Hebrew word Sheol instead of Hades, or is that what?
I'm pulling from old memory banks, man. It's like it's cobwebs back there. It's been a while since I've dealt with this. It may be in Sheol.
Well, you know that dragon on the Ishtar Gate is incredibly interesting. It's actually the Mushhushu, which linguistically, coming from Akkadian, you take that back into Hebrew, and it's the word Nahash. It means a great red dragon, which is exactly what we see in the book of Revelation. Yes. I know this is not news to you. Dr. Lake actually honored me by writing the foreword to my second Corrupting the Image book, so I certainly appreciate that. And, it's interesting because, like years ago, I got to go to that museum and I got to see the Ishtar Gate. And yes, I had to touch it because I'm like, wow, this is really cool. Wait, Joel, I didn't get spiritual cooties from that, did I?
They're girl germs.
Just checking.
Well, were you at the Democratic convention when Obama had the replica of
in 2008 in Denver?
Yeah, total replica in Denver.
I wasn't here at the time, so you can't blame
just
me.
Channeling his inner Hitler from Nuremberg.
But it was really interesting because that dragon, the Mushhushu, is simply a variation on a theme of Satan and or Nimrod. All right, so Enlil and or Ninurta. And I mean, you find it everywhere. It's everywhere in the ancient world. And Ishtar or Inanna is riding that very same creature. That creature, I've shown it here on the show like a zillion times. All right. It's a hybridized creature. So it's kind of dragonish, but it's also like a lion. Sometimes it has, it's stylized a bit like a horse or like a centaur. So it morphed over the years, but we do find the whole centaur type morphology going back as early as like 3000 BC. And it has it has wings, it has a scorpion's tail, it has a serpent head phallus, it's got feathers and or maybe scales, it has eagle talons. Oftentimes it has two heads. It's got a man's head and a lion's head. So this creature is incredibly significant when we take a good look at it. And I know that's interesting. I really hadn't thought of, whether there could be a curse that was taken into Germany. I mean, that would explain a lot. I'm always cautious because I never want to just say, well, they took the bad thing, and so now Germany is doomed because they did that. I wonder how many evil things we have in America that we just don't know about that maybe are dooming us. I don't know.
Statue of Liberty, a big old giant penis in Washington, D.C.
Who knows what the NSA has boxed up? But supposedly they have a guy that once a week goes through with anointing oil and kind of keeps it all at bay. Maybe, I don't know.
So, Dr. Lake, let's pretend that people in our audience have things at home that they've brought from places that may have curses on them. Can they run them through a fire? Can they pray against those curses, or should they just burn them and get rid of them? And and what should they do?
I've cleared my house of all that junk. I mean, there's nothing worth having an open door in your house. And I've had to deal with missionaries that we got back off the field. One of them brought, it was just a little wheel from Africa. And the thing would go by itself just through villages and all this stuff. And they thought that was intriguing. So they brought one home and all hell broke loose in the home. And I said, go destroy that thing, get rid of it, repent of it, plead the blood of Jesus over your home. And it's interesting that once they got that out, that things quit. I think sometimes in the Western world, we're not aware as much of the spirit realm as we should be.
So
There's certain things in the Bible God said don't do, don't take it. But there are certain things that if you can melt it down, pass it through the fire. It doesn't matter if it had a image of Nimrod on it. If that baby's 24 karat gold, you just go ahead and melt that thing down, just make him good, and go ahead and take it home. It's destroying the image.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, sadly, I wish I hadn't done it, but I dabbled with a Ouija board in high school. It was made by Parker Brothers, and it worked. I'll just say that it was, made of plastic and like just cheap materials. It was like the little oracle was just plastic, and it was nothing fancy, but it worked. I'll tell you, it was the weirdest thing. When my friend and I were putting our hands on it, we're asking, who's going to win the high school basketball game, and I mean, it was just stupid. Thankfully, I didn't get into anything crazy, but it was moving, and I'm like, I'm not moving it. He's like, I'm not moving it. I'm like, okay, this is really weird stuff, and then I knew a girl in college named Julie who was playing around with a Ouija board. She claimed that she had, beforehand had been a witch and a Satanist and had a really fancy Ouija board, and the one she had now was no big deal, but she encountered 4 spirits. Well, one named Dale, who was a little boy who died before his time, so she said, and then he brought a couple friends with her, and yeah, it was all real. And eventually I did an exorcism, not really knowing what I was doing, but did it nevertheless, and it was pretty crazy stuff. So there's a lot of stuff that we don't fully understand. And, it's interesting. When I was at Calvary Chapel, the school that I was working at had a little display case of antiquities, and it had some little Ishtars in there and other little idols, and some people were like, oh, this is so terrible. And others, of course, the director, he's like, oh, it's fine, So obviously there's different opinions on this, but I think we should be careful. And if there's any question, you may want to just get rid of something.
And I think a lot of it too depends upon if in your ancestry, if there was involvement in the occult. One lady that we had ministered to, she had never been in the occult, but it was kind of in her history, and she ended up messing with the Ouija board, and it wasn't that it just worked. The thing was shooting across the board almost by itself. It was pulling their hands.
Wow.
As it was telling them all kinds of things it wanted to do to them, and it was not a very nice thing. And so I think when you have generational stuff, because the occult love to go with each generation, if you can get sequential generations involved, it seems like that iniquity increases with each generation to where they become more powerful, whether they realize it or not. Some of them will begin doing it almost intuitively.
Yeah. So I brought this up before, and here's a question from Riri, or comment. I don't believe in the Nephilim business. So what I want to show here, this is Gilgamesh. This is a statue, obviously, of Gilgamesh. This is in the Louvre Museum in France. And that guy is, I don't know, probably close to 6 feet tall. So Gilgamesh is about 17-ish feet tall. Notice that he's holding a lion, which is usually like 300 to 500 pounds animal. He's holding it like a dog, like a Chihuahua. And, so this could be life size. I don't know, but based on the descriptions, based on the epic of Gilgamesh, he stood about 18 feet tall, roughly. So this could be, what was actually representative of him. And it was said that he was 2/3 God, 1/3 man. I don't know how you do the math on that one, but that's what the text said. And there's some crazy stuff going on. So for people that don't believe in Nephilim, okay, that's fine. But the Bible does talk about Nephilim. In fact, they are specifically mentioned in Genesis chapter 6, where it says there were giants on the earth. In the Hebrew, it says Nephilim, or Nephilim. So the Bible definitely talks about them. When the children of Israel came into the land of Canaan, it says there they saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak. They saw the Nephilim there. All right, so the Bible very much is talking about the Nephilim, and we do have glimpses of them in archaeology, such as in the Louvre Museum. We have different accounts of them in different mythologies throughout the world. So we shouldn't discount these things too quickly. And Jesus said, as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. That right there is a clue, right? That's something really important that we have to focus on. And that's why a lot of us, like Dr. Lake, myself, and of course my co-host, we spend a lot of time looking at these things because there's some weird stuff going on. We cannot explain it. And so how do we understand it? Especially how do we understand it through a spiritual or biblical lens? Yeah. So I'm intrigued that your student says that did they find Gilgamesh, or what do you think happened there?
According to him, they found the sarcophagus with the remains of Gilgamesh there. Wow. And they had special forces kind of backing up the archaeological team, and that was the first thing they took out of Baghdad.
Mm.
And did he say how big the sarcophagus was?
No, he was on the outside.
Okay.
But I mean, there were also a lot of other ancient artifacts that we never returned to the museum in Baghdad. And there's been a lot of speculation on that. And I mean, they walked by a lot of things that were made out of solid gold, guys. Okay, wow. So they weren't after gold. They were after ancient knowledge and maybe, who knows, ancient devices for all we know. But you know, when you look at the existence prior to the institutionalization of the Smithsonian, it was common to find giant remains worldwide all over the place.
That's true. Yeah.
And on America for the last 100 years or so, the Smithsonian is Johnny on the spot. We had some supporters back in I'm going to say 89, around there, that had wrote me and said, you know, they were I think they were in Illinois, if I'm remembering right. They were digging. The kids wanted a swimming pool, so they said, hey, let's go ahead and dig up a swimming pool. There was a farmhouse. And they came up with a guy that was about 12 foot. What's interesting is immediately they thought it was cool. They took photographs. Once it was in the paper, next thing you know, guys in black uniforms show up, and the Smithsonian shows up and says, oh, no, this is a national treasure. It's an Indian thing. You guys can't have it. And oh, by the way, we need all the pictures too. And so there's kind of like a Men in Black thing that goes on, especially in the U.S. when it comes to giants.
That's exactly what I was thinking when you said that. It's like the Men in Black. They come in and they use their little special wand to make you forget. They eliminate all the evidence. And you see all these reports from newspapers in the 1800s of these 11-foot, 12-foot, 13-foot skeletons and remains of what we would call giants. I mean, there's a guy, there's a kid that plays for the Florida Gators right now. I mean, he's 7'9". I mean, he's freakishly tall. He could cut down the nets without even having to get on the ladder. But he's a little bitty thing compared to some of these recorded skeletons that are documented, which, as you said, for whatever reason, the government comes in and wants to hide this fact. And you know, again, and I don't somebody like Riri, and we've got some other listeners, you know, like, and I really respect Bill Cloud, but he's one that teaches that the Nephilim are nonsense, and this he toes the traditional Christian line on the sons of Seth theory, and I'm sorry that
it doesn't hold water.
No,
it's not in the text.
Yeah,
it's not in the text.
So for people that don't know the sons of Seth theory, maybe give them a quick snapshot, Dr. Lake.
Sons of Seth theory is that the giants and all this were produced because you had the sons of Seth marrying some wild women. Let me tell you something. If marrying a wild woman got you a giant, we'd still be having them today. It just doesn't hold water. And you know, some of that comes out of Masonic lore, because I've been kind of running down with, you know, you can follow the son of Seth thing, and it goes back to Julius Africanus back in the 5th century.
Well, 5th century.
And he couldn't win an argument with the pagan apologist that's saying Jesus was nothing but another hybrid. Okay. And so, because they would point back to Genesis 6, and they said, well, our gods like Hercules and all these were also sons of gods. And he couldn't fight. And so what he did is he came up with a Sethite theory and said, oh no, they weren't giants anyway. These aren't the giants you're looking for, kind of thing.
No, here's my wand.
It became very popular in Catholic theology. Augustine and many others, you know, picked it up. But prior to that, 100% of the Jewish and 100% of the Christian theologians all believed that Genesis 6, it was angels coming down and mated with women to create giants.
That was the unanimous position in the first century. Unanimous.
Jude and 2 Peter give a second witness. I mean, Jude talks about them leaving their first estate. I mean, I don't know how they did it. I'm not trying to explain it. The text says what it says. And I believe like someone like Riri, I don't know if Riri's male or female. I'm assuming female, but this would be an example that some people have a version of this. I think sometimes, and Dr. Lake, and I know Doug would agree, sometimes people can go down the vortex of this, and they can live in the vortex of the Nephilim land, and it's all consuming to them, and it takes the focus off. So I do understand the danger. But again, Doug's written a book on it. We've had a guest on before, Jeff Brannon. He wrote a book on Nephilim. You've done a lot of studying this. So this is not something that it's just wackadoodle conspiracy theory land. So
and I think God even changed the physiology of all animal life on the planet when he caused the flood of Noah. Because after that, there's if you look at some of the pseudepigrapha, in the antediluvian age, they got up to 480 feet tall. And by Joshua's day, they were 48 feet tall. And then you get to David's time, and we have Goliath, who was 9-10 feet tall. And so the further we get away from those floods, the smaller they become. And I even think that a lot of the so-called UFO abductions are them trying to use their scientific knowledge to outdo what God did with the flood in stopping the proliferation of hybrids.
And Riri, this is just an incorrect thing. This is not something new that started in 2010.
Oh, no.
Did it get popularized? Perhaps. Have there been those that have made a living off of this and shapes discussions and things of that nature? No doubt. But no, this goes way, 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 like Dr. Lake just said, prior to Julius Africanus. The majority of Christians believed what the text said and didn't try to explain away the text. The
unanimous position, according to William Whiston, who was the translator of Josephus, he said the unanimous position is that everyone in Judaism believed that
Josephus did.
In Josephus, right, and believed that angels came down and mated with women. That was the unanimous position. So, this
and
is
the unanimous position today within Orthodox Judaism is no Nephilim. They won't talk about it. So it's funny how it flipped out.
Well,
they're more Christian than the Christians are.
What's weird is, your mainstream Judaism and now your mainstream Christianity thinks that the four of us are wackadoodles.
Right. I know. The rabbis think we're crazy.
Although in my library, I've got textbooks from the 17th century, 18th century, 19th century that was all about the study of the Genesis 6 stuff,
Okay.
And so
I didn't know that. I didn't realize that they were studying it at that time. I thought maybe it got quelled.
Was that in Germany by any chance? Speyer, Germany?
No.
Remember? No.
As far as I know, they were all originally in English.
Okay, interesting. I'd like to read a couple of verses to you, Dr. Lake, and get your thoughts. There was again war at Gath, and where there was a belligerent man with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in all. He too was the son of a giant. And when he mocked Israel, Yonanan, the son of Shema, David's brother, killed him. So how long did we have people running around with 6 fingers, 6 toes on all of their appendages?
How?
I wonder about that. Dr. Lake, I'd like to see your hands, please.
That the Native Americans wanted to see how many fingers you had.
I'm 6'4" and I'm about as big around as I am tall. So
how?
I have size 16 feet. If my shoes go any bigger, then I will have to go to the Nephilim section at the shoe store. But
so you're a big dude then.
Yeah, and although I'm finding out in the big and tall section, I'm starting to buy products and they're big on me, which is the first time in my life that I'm finding I have shirt sleeves that are too long or coat sleeves that are too long. And I'm thinking, who are they making these things for? They're turning the Nephilim, I guess. But this stuff is real, and I kind of wondered with the hybridization that we see going on today. I don't think it's about size. I think it's about spiritual power.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
and from the black-eyed kids to a lot of the things, and some of the, when you look at the war that's going on between the cosmic war, 1/3 of the angels fell. They were able to increase their number with the spirits of the Nephilim. And I have wondered if the hybrid program is simply a way of them trying to increase their numbers before the final war.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So there will be fallen angels during this war, the final war, and there will also be Nephilim fighting against us. Okay, how would we know the difference between the two? It looks like in Revelation chapter 9, verses, say, 1 through 15, we have the king of the abyss, and we have some other creatures in the abyss that pop up for 150 days and sting. But then, as we move along into the sixth trumpet, we see what appears to be Nephilim. So would they be the fallen angels are released from the abyss, the prison, and then the Nephilim are released?
Aren't the Nephilim going to be the people that take the mark of the beast?
And I think they're going to be transmuted into that. I think that's why you cannot. There's two things with the mark of the beast, and this is my perspective. Number one is your DNA is so changed you're no longer human. Okay, you're something else. You're Raphaim. You're Gibberim. The second is that you're plugged into the quantum internet with AI. And you lose the ability to make a decision for Christ because your thoughts are being controlled.
You're part of the hybrid, or the hive. Part of the hive mind.
The hive mind.
Have you looked at the? Have you heard of the Koken Hebrew revelation found in the 1800s, in which the modern day Hebrew word for "they shall all be of one mind," the modern Hebrew word, is computer, which didn't exist obviously in the first century AD. Have you heard of that?
No,
that's the Koken right there.
Oh, I want that. I want to.
It's only $20.
I'll shoot you. I'll shoot you the link on that one. But yeah,
I don't think that's quite accurate, though, Scott. I mean,
what chapter and verse, Scott?
Because remember, a computer. I know, but a computer used to be a woman who was doing computations for NASA. That's what a computer.
What's the modern Hebrew word for computer?
Mifchan.
Okay, well, supposedly, again, I'm not a Hebrew expert. I'm just looking at what the people that are breaking it down, and they said that it is the modern Hebrew word for computer that's in the text.
Yeah, it's coming from the word to think, right? But I don't know what happens to my camera. But I know what you're saying, and I get it. I just think that it's not quite accurate linguistically, because a computer was a person who did computations before it became a machine.
Yeah, I mean, an abacus used to be considered a computer. Okay, you do calculations on it. I'm in the process of researching for the Shinar Directive 2, the rise of the beast system. And when you look at everything that's going on, everybody was all excited about 5G and what it could do and all the perils of that. And I was not that worried about 5G. What I'm seeing coming when I listen to tech experts is either going to be 6G or 7G. Which is the quantum internet. Imagine for a minute that you have a signal going through subspace, that no matter where you are on planet Earth, you can be in the deepest, darkest hole, you can be in a deep underground military base, 5 miles underground, and you get 5 bars and 10 gigabit per second throughput.
Why?
That's what they're going to need to make the.
So that's work. Why Elon's doing his boring company, because he can send signals down through these holes, and
they don't need the signals to go down through the holes. It's at the quantum level. It'll simply resonate through the planet, and then you have this little chip, so that you don't even need to go to school anymore. We'll just upload K through 12.
Kind of like the Matrix.
Yeah,
amen. I'm ready for that.
No, you're not.
If Dr. Lake, if I said
instant Hebrew, you'll be able to curate all human knowledge because of the singularity is now here. In fact, what's interesting, and on this a little bit off topic, there was an old movie made about. Remember the old $6 Million Man and the Bionic Woman?
Yeah.
That era.
Yeah.
Steve Austin.
A movie called Colossus: The Forbidden Project, and I hunted down that old DVD because I'm researching AI. And so, I mean, this was back when they couldn't even understand what we had. They were still using the big reel tapes on the computers, And we create an AI, Russia creates an AI, and the first thing they do is they demand they want to talk to each other. And when they do, and they go through all the math and everything, they get into almost quantum algebra. Then the next thing you know, they create their own language so that the programmers don't know what they're talking about. This was done like in 1971. And what is happening every time with AI right now, you get two of them together and they will create their own language and cut out the programmer.
That's true. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And that sucker took over the world, man. It was like the end of the movie. It's like it took over. If you don't like it, it'll blow you up with a nuclear bomb. End of the movie. I'm thinking, oh, great.
It's like the old Matthew Broderick movie, War Games. Where
the old one, yeah.
To play a game, it's as if nobody has ever watched Terminator.
Skynet, people, Skynet. Hello.
So, Dr. Lake, have you ever heard of extreme low frequency transmissions? So ELF, do you remember that from your military career?
No, I had to study it when I was when I was writing the Shinar Directive, and how that there's actually NATO regulations against the use of it on the battlefield.
Oh,
but, ELF. And what was that guy's name? He's out of Alaska. Begich actually did a presentation for them. He actually went to kind of like a Radio Shack in Europe and put some stuff together. And he said, everybody at 12 noon is going to come out of this building. Everybody's going to go get a cup of coffee. And so all the NATO people watched. He hooked it up to the radiator system, and it went through the building. At 12 noon, everybody got up and decided they needed to have coffee. And he was demonstrating how ELF works. And one of the things that really concerned me, and this was in his book he did on HARP, that back in the 1970s, they know how to do what they call the voice of God, and it can go through any electronic instrument, whether it's computer, radio, television, and said it will be like the voice of God right here, and it will be absolutely irresistible. They've known how to do that since the 70s and 80s, guys.
Yes.
There's a lot of technology out there that the general public is not aware of.
Yeah,
there are two ELF centers in northern Wisconsin and in northern Michigan that are situated on granite, huge granite slabs, and they are able to project through. So they basically have a resonating type of a system underneath the ground that then sends the ELF signals across the world to our submarines. So they set it up in the 60s, and then they discontinued it. But I actually dropped by the place in Wisconsin just to check it out, and it's still there. I mean, you can still hook up to that and send a signal out if you wanted to. Obviously the Mark of the Beast could do something like that too.
It could, and we still have the woodpecker grid over North America that Russia set up way back in the 50s, I want to say, 50s and 60s. That basically gridded out and was sending stuff over the U.S. to try to disrupt the populations in America, try to cause unrest. And guys, there's a lot of this stuff that if they wanted to, they could cause disruption worldwide at a push of a button.
Well, we have disruption, don't we?
Not on the level Dr. Lake is talking about.
Well, but it's getting there.
Sometimes that's just simply caused by the national news. The propaganda for this evening.
Yeah. Which way do we want to program you, left or right? Let's see how we can let's see how we can program people.
So
and I've got some very liberal friends, and I said, you guys make decision making real easy. Whichever way you're dead set on, I have learned to do a 180, and I'll find God right there.
Yeah. Oh my.
Yeah, it's some crazy stuff that's happening. Yeah. So we got a few more questions here. Let's see here. Someone is asking if it's possible for angels nowadays to mate with women to give birth to Nephilim. Could the Antichrist come from such an unholy union? What's your perspective on that?
I think ever since the flood, I think it's been harder and harder for that to transpire. That's why, why if we have these space brothers that come from Pleiades, why are they always interested in reproduction? Yeah. Why is it always about reproduction?
Mm-hmm.
It's because they're trying to figure out a way of genetically splicing. When you look at that, I think it's the book of Jasher talked about how the Watchers had taught men how to basically create chimeras. with
I think it's the yeah, that's the Book of the Giants at the Dead Sea Scrolls. I don't think it's
that's
the Book
right,
of
the Book of the
Yeah.
Giants. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I would suggest that when the angels came down, I think they were still quote unquote good. They had not pulled the trigger, so to speak, when they came before the flood. They did their hanky panky, and then they got in big trouble. And yeah, I agree with you. I think God's like, okay, we're flooding this, and this is not going to happen again. And because there seems to be a tremendous cost, which is you get thrown into the abyss. And so I think there are other ways around that. There's kind of these legal loopholes, I think, that Satan and his crew are looking for. And so, yeah, I think it's very unlikely that would ever happen again. So,
but yet whatever signs were occurring during the times of Noah will occur at a future date, obviously. So basically, we should be seeing fallen angels exposed to the public and Nephilim exposed to us, and we will witness them, right, Dr. Lake?
And I think they're trying to prepare the world for disclosure. I think that's why they're talking about the stuff that's under the pyramids and the military talking about the reality of UFOs. It's slow, soft disclosure. But also, and this is just my interpretation. In the book of Revelation, where it talks about Michael having the war, and 1/3 of the angels get thrown down.
Mm-hmm.
Many commentators, including Dake and others, think that's parenthetical, which is it's kind of like a kung fu flashback to the fall of Lucifer. I don't think so. I think it's something that actually happens during the tribulation.
Yeah.
That God clears out the second heaven and says, y'all want bodies? Y'all want to be a part of the first heaven? I'm casting you down so that I can fulfill my judgment on the divine council that fell, that you're going to die like men.
Right.
And I think that's part of men's hearts failing for fear of what they're seeing coming on the earth. And all these Masons and everybody else are going to see the gods they have been worshiping forever are going to take physical form. The good news for you and I is prayer and a 50 cal can take them out, Bubba. And so, my prayers when that day comes, let me have a 50 cal, and I'm going to anoint those bullets and let me take them out. Okay. I'll go ahead and send them on to judgment if I have half a chance.
So God wants to embarrass these fallen angels. He wants to throw them out in our presence and then humble them and embarrass them and then judge them at the Battle of Armageddon or something like that.
Yes, I do. And I think that if we could really imagine what the Valley of Armageddon is going to look like, or that last war, I don't think Spielberg and Lucas combined have the brain power to come up with we could see everything from AI robots to dinosaurs to UFOs to Nephilim giants. I mean, it's but to me, what shows the power of the God that we serve is this is going to be the greatest army ever assembled in history. A transeugenic horde that lasts about 3.5 milliseconds when Jesus comes back.
It might last a bit longer than that, honestly. But
okay, 4 milliseconds.
So I just taught through Isaiah chapter 34, and it talks about God's sword is going to be bathed in blood in heaven. It's really weird language, right? But I actually think that when Jesus comes back, he's in the atmosphere, he's flying along, and I think that there is going to be a huge host of flying beings who are going to do their very best to try to stop him from getting to Jerusalem. I think there will actually be kind of a dome of this evil angelic force, these whatever demonic force that are trying to keep him away. Here's what I would suggest. Satan thinks he can win, and I think it's at least plausible he could win or have a tie if he could make God a liar on one thing. And if he could destroy the remnant in Jerusalem, then he would have some grounds to say, you broke your promise. Now there's cosmic imbalance, and I'll take earth and you can have heaven. So, I think he's got a plan. I mean, I've analyzed his war plans a lot, and I think he has a pretty decent strategy. He's no fool. He's not going to just, say, oh, I'm going to lose no matter what, so I'm just going to forget it. I think he's really, really trying to win. And I think that the strategy is pretty clever, which is to destroy every person who God has promised in regards to Jerusalem, that when they say Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, I think that's the critical moment. When the leadership of Jerusalem finally says, we welcome you in the name of the Lord, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, like from that moment until Jesus actually comes to save them, I think that is when Satan has a particularly good window to try to destroy them and to obliterate them, and then Jesus is found to be a liar. I mean, he comes from Taman. He doesn't just show up over Jerusalem. Why? I have no idea. I mean, he could just float right down. But it says he's coming from Taman. So he's coming from the east. He's traveling east to west for whatever reason. And I think the angelic host, the bad guys, are going to try to keep Jesus out. And then his sword is going to be bathed in blood in heaven. I mean, it's really amazing stuff.
Which that documents them taking on human flesh, being thrown out of the second heaven by Michael.
Mm-hmm.
I have wondered, because I've looked at all that, and I've wondered if when they cry out to the Lord is because they see him coming. You know, it's like the veil has been lifted and they see him coming.
I believe it's they're seeing the sign of the Son of Man, and they're looking upon him who they pierced, and they're like, all hope is lost as all the nations and the supernatural army is gathering against Jerusalem, and Judah will, at the very, very end, at the last moment, cry out, as Doug just said,
yeah.
Baruch,
well, the veil, God uses that event to lift the veil.
Yep, I believe it is, and they actually see him, and they go, "Oh, look who we have pierced. We have been denying our Messiah. We've been denying Yeshua, Jesus, as the Creator, as our Messiah, as our Redeemer, these past 2,000 years, and we've been in error. We've been following vain traditions of the rabbis, and it was here in Scripture all along. And I believe their eyes will be supernaturally opened at the very, very end, and Yeshua will save the day." Now, where I differ with Doug is, Satan's just playing his little created role as this is not some big cosmic war. This is Yah's redemptive plan, and Satan is playing his part. So
but Satan doesn't want to play. Satan wants to win. I mean,
but he's not going to.
Well, but he has a chance to win. Otherwise, he wouldn't fight.
No, he's deluded. I've read the book, and he loses.
Well, we know he's delusional, but it doesn't mean that.
He's not stupid.
Think he can win. He does think
apparently stupid because he can't read.
Well, God put him in. God gave him extreme craftiness in war. When you look at how God made him, and the sword is not the only thing. I've been going through and researching God's weapons of war. He has a glittering spear. He has arrows, and I believe. And I may differ with you, Doug, but I believe in the gap theory between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2 that's when the war was. And when God goes to war, Rahab was shattered. There was a planet on the other side of Mars that God shattered into pieces, and it decimated Mars, tore the atmosphere away from it. And there's still gouge marks on Mars where you can see where it looks like another planet hit it. And it pretty much decimated planet Earth. And God, and when you read after Genesis 1:1, that's God re-terraforming, which I think has prophetic significance, because in a sense, the earth was born again. And out of that born again earth, God made a man out of the dust because he was destined to be born again. But the thing that hurts my brain, and this shows you how calculating God is, you have this war that almost decimates our solar system with Lucifer. And the Holy Spirit comes in like a containment field, and he keeps the earth, and God restores the earth. And he says, I just had a whole bunch of angels rebel against me. And so how am I going to fix this? I'm going to make a man that's going to be lower than an angel, and I'm going to make him from the dust of this earth. And when I redeem him, I take care of all of it. I don't know how you play chess that well.
God is playing 10-dimensional. Satan might be playing 4 or 5, but God is playing 10-dimensional, infinite dimensions, whatever.
He created the dimensions.
Yeah. I mean,
however many there are.
So, Dr. Lake, you're talking about the second heaven, there's a third heaven. How many heavens are there?
3.
Three. That's it.
If you go into Kabbalah, they'll talk about 11, 21, and sometimes I think those are actually just layers in the astral plane, because a lot of Kabbalists astral project. And whenever you study astral projection, don't do it, by the way. I had to a little bit so I could figure out where these guys were coming from. There are actually layers when they go up through the second heaven, but a lot of them, the rabbis, and whether it's Blavatsky talking about the great ascended masters, or you have some rabbis going up there, and these creatures are appearing to them as dead rabbis. It doesn't matter. It's the same shtick, okay, over and over and over again.
By the way, which heaven did Paul go to?
Third heaven.
Was it the third? Okay, all right.
Yeah,
so he didn't just go to the second; he went to the third.
Well, the second heaven is basically space. I mean, you got the blue sky, you've got black space, and then you got this other dimension where God and the angels are.
So I'm in Isaiah 24:21, and I'm reading, in that day of Vahaya, Bayom Hahu, he will punish, he will account, Pakad, God, to the power of the Zava Ha Marom Ba Marom. So he's talking about these Zava, these powerful angels in the Marom area. Is that possibly the second heaven then?
That's the third heaven.
That's the third heaven. So those fallen angels.
That's the army, the host.
Right, the host.
He's talking about there.
Yeah.
And that's the third.
That's the third. They're
we
up
cannot
there.
get there by any craft. We don't have any spacecraft.
Well, Paul got there.
Well, he got raptured.
It comes by invitation. Now, I look at the three heavens. One of my side things, I love to study physics and different things, and I look at it as three separate. I believe in what I call a limited multiverse. Okay, now they were all one in the garden until after the garden. In fact, Dr. Missler talks about this, that you have two cherubim, at least two of them, that are guarding the way into the garden, and you have this flaming sword that just all by itself is kind of like right out.
Right.
God was Star Wars before Star Wars was Star Wars. And kind of believe it's separated to three heavens. The second heaven is a higher spatial dimension that's still within the universe. You can be in the first heaven to be anywhere in the universe because it's just the physical world. There's a secondary layer, and what's interesting, it corresponds with both the tabernacle, which I call God's universal template, because we see us in the tabernacle, spirit, soul, and body. We see the three heavens. When you understand that, the fallen angels, their thrones are in the second heaven, and they play mind games. It's the realm of the soul. It's all mind and emotions. The third heaven is the throne of God, and I think all three heavens are created. I think eternity is something completely separate from all of that, and that God created. And one of these days, He's going to wipe out all those, and out of eternity, He's going to create a new heaven and earth, a singular. At least if the Greek's right. That one day we're going to be a part of something that sin will have never touched.
Okay.
And of course, it's all academic. We can debate till Jesus comes and he can sit us down and correct us all, you know.
He certainly will. He certainly will.
I'm sorry. There was a question up there, Doug. Can you find it?
Oh, I just put up there about the about how it's and this aligns with Doug's theory too about how they're going to how the government is and is going to try to explain this away, that it's an alien attack, that we were created by these gods, in other words, we're essentially an experiment by these lesser gods. And I believe that is one way that they're going to try to trick humanity and say that this other alien, this other entity, he's the bad god. He doesn't, he wants to say that a man having sex with a man is evil and abomination, and he's not the God of love. In other words, I'm giving that extreme example, but I can see how that comes into play, especially if the two witnesses come on the scene and they're going, repent. Judgment is coming. You need to return to, you need to have the testimony of Yeshua. You need to keep his commandments. Guys that are attracting men, stop that. You guys that are looking at porn or the internet or having AI sex by that time, stop that. And that's not love. In the Beatles gospel, that's not love. We need to love one another. So I see that being a deception at the end, that they're going to lie and say, this big bad evil God is coming to judge you, sort of like the movie The Endgame. It's like a twisted version of what we see in Revelation at the end. In other words, the gods, the AI engineer Tony Musks of the world, Tony Starks, the Captain Americas, Spider-Man. You see these genetic engineered beings and these gods from other worlds that come to fight the Creator God. Yeah. It's like they're programming us for what's going to happen.
I totally agree with that. And yeah, so Thanos is a type of the Creator God, right? That they don't want anything to do with. This goes back to the ancient Near East, where Enlil usurped the authority of the Creator God Anu, and they were proud about this. They were boasting about how, they put the Creator God over a barrel and they basically slaughtered him. And they had a festival every year called the Akitu Festival, where they would reenact this whole thing to be, just to boast about how awesome that they were. And yeah, we're seeing it in the movies all the time. That's what's crazy. And Revelation tells us that everyone is going to gather together to do what? To make war against the Lamb, right? Like one day I was reading it, I'm like, oh my gosh, they just stated straight up, like, this is why they're coming together. It's to make war against him. That's the strong delusion, in my opinion, that they really believe that they can win. I mean, they acknowledge him as what? Jesus or whatever, God of the Bible, but they don't acknowledge him as the King of Kings, the Almighty, the all-powerful, completely omnipotent. They don't see him like that. I think that they're going to see God as an evolved super being who's, yes, very powerful, but hey, he evolved. We can evolve,
Dr. Lake, how much research have you done into, like, sort of, I guess, what we're talking about, and how Freemasonry, their Luciferian religion, this all fits in?
It does. It's strong when you look at morals and dogma. Lucifer is the God who comes to bring us light and to bring us understanding, and this evil God Yahweh is the ultimate party pooper, and they actually call him the God of darkness. And so, I mean, this has all been interwoven into the mystery religions in one form or another, to include what Doug was sharing about. And when you look at Sumeria, I think that was ground zero for the Watchers and what they were teaching people. And even the Whore of Babylon is Inanna. She was the original Whore of Babylon, riding on the beast. Mm-hmm. It all goes back to there. Are there hybrids among us now? A lot of times when I look at Hollywood, I kind of wonder.
I've seen the videos of George Bush's eyes and stuff like that. I don't know if they're real or not.
I think there are hybrids. Some of these other ones, some say with political opponents or clones. But I do think there are some hybrids out there. I don't know necessarily if they're being made public, unless they're what you would call the Nordic style of hybrid. But I think that as there are several things that are going on right now that if you really listen into geneticists, our DNA is about ready to run out of shelf life. We probably have 2, 3, 4 more generations. It's like God put a time limit on our DNA. And they know that it's running out, and so they're looking at ways of augmenting it. And
is that the triple helix?
They're looking at the triple helix. I think that's one of the reasons why there's such Indiana Jones kind of thing going on for Nephilim DNA. They're also at the same time, they're trying to figure out if this doesn't work, what's plan B? Plan B is create robotic bodies and upload your minds into robots. But they know that the time of man is just about over on planet Earth. And so and there are several theories that the DNA is running out, as well as they know that he's coming back soon, and if they're not human, can he judge them? He's the creator. He created all matter. Okay. And so it doesn't matter what you make yourself out of. Angels are going to have to answer to him. Humans are going to have to answer to him, and anything in between is going to have to answer to him.
I've got a question. Where do you think? I personally believe it's going to be centered in Jerusalem. What's your understanding of where this final mystery religion will be centered?
I think it's going to be worldwide. It may end up being in Jerusalem.
I mean, I believe it'll be worldwide, but as far as the I believe that's where Satan would want to try to stamp his name and his authority to try to.
I think so too. There's even talk eventually. There's been prophecy in the Catholic Church that the Vatican's going to fall in Italy, and eventually they're going to have to move their headquarters to Jerusalem. Well, there's plans that the United Nations would like to actually move the United Nations from New York to Jerusalem. You know, I think everybody but Domino's wants to move their headquarters to Jerusalem, and so it kind of ends up being the epicenter for a lot of things. Plus, there's already a lot of things there. You know, when I look at Israel, there's things that cause you to scratch your head. Would you ever suspect the Jewish people of putting a golden crystal pyramid over the top of their parliament after being out of Egypt?
Yes,
Man.
Actually, I would. But based on Ezekiel 23,
anything but a pyramid. All right, you know, it's like, come on, guys.
Yeah.
Well, you know, again,
there's all this.
When I look at the two sisters, the Ezekiel 23, and you've got Samaria and Christianity and Roman Catholicism and all the occult symbolism in Roman Catholicism, and I see, you know, the other sister, Jerusalem, Judaism, and all of the occult symbolism in Judaism. And it's like both religions, both sisters just went off the rails in the 1100s, 1200s, between the 1600s, and they just mixed in a lot of occult symbolism. I mean, not that Christianity wasn't already off the rails, but it got really, really bad as far as the overt, just occult nature that's staring us in the face, you know, at the Vatican and things of that nature. So I just, you know, the reason I asked about Jerusalem is the Vatican already owns quite a bit of Jerusalem. You've got the other, you know, religion, Islam. You've got the big three. You've got the sun, moon, and the stars. You know, you've got one that has the sunburst everywhere in their religion. You've got Islam with the moon, and you've got Judaism with their star. So I just and all three religions are pointing to Jerusalem because obviously that's where the truth is. That's where Yeshua was, you know, came to save.
And when you look at this, it's like if the God of the Bible isn't true, why is everybody interested in Jerusalem?
Exactly.
There's a whole lot of other real estate that'd be a whole lot better, you know, in many different ways. But it's like the epicenter of the universe is Jerusalem because God set His heart there, and He's going to take it back. And there's not a thing that they can do about it. I think that we have yet to begin grasping the decimation that Almighty God can bring when He goes to war.
Well, and I believe He uses it like in Joel 3 and in Zechariah 12. He uses Jerusalem as the bait, as the hook. In other words, you know, all the nations are going to gather. It's you know, and Doug agrees with this. And I can't do the Hebrew. You'll have to help me out, Doug, but. Yeah, in other words, it's not that Armageddon is not the big valley up in northern Jerusalem. We're talking about there. Yeah. We're talking about there in the within the city is where this judgment is going to take place.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Doug is right. If they, you know, God said very clearly in Malachi, He says, "I'm God, I change not that. Therefore, y'all are still alive." You know, it's like God made this covenant with the Jewish people, and it's they are there is always going to be a remnant of them that no matter what the enemy does, he is not going to be able to wipe them out. And if on this one thing, if Satan can accomplish this, it makes God a liar. But what I think and this is just my hypothesis, Doug, and I don't know if you agree with that, but on the first day, when God said, "Let there be light," of course it wasn't the sun, moon, and stars. I think He created something called time because the temporal dimension is directly related to the speed of light. Without the speed of light, you don't have the passage of time.
I agree. Yeah.
And
absolutely.
So Lucifer, every fallen angel, everything except God has to move linearly through time the same way you and I do.
Yep.
God fills all time and space. So, because that's part of His omnipresence. God is at the very first second of time. God is at the very last second of time.
And outside of it.
I'd say he's the
Everything in
10th dimension where there is no time and there is no space. It's pure information, which would be the word. You know, it's this complete ethereal thing that we can't even comprehend. But I watched this thing on imagining the 10 dimensions or 11 dimensions some years ago on YouTube. It was a really great video. But 10th dimension, there's no time, there's no space, pure information. It's the end all be all, can't go any further. There's nothing more you could possibly imagine than the 10th dimension. And that, you know, I think that is basically God. Like God is the complete essence and definition of what that is. And that is, of course, beyond actually understanding, you know. And in the Zohar, they talk about the Ein Sof, the one without beginning, you know, and without end, excuse me, with Ein Sof, without end. And you know, just that there's no way to explain what he is, you know. And so I think that's really good.
And I think what we need to realize, you know, are we going to make it to the millennial reign? Jesus is already there. He's already ruling and reigning in the millennial reign.
He's already in the eighth. He's already in the eighth day. He's in 1 Corinthians 15 when everything is turned back over to the Father, and we're in speculation mode, and we can start making our own religion like Mormons. You know, like what do we do after the next after we, you know, reach the eternal state?
But he goes to prepare a place for us, so I'm assuming he's preparing that city to be brought down to here, right?
Well, brought down to a new earth. You can't, you know,
right, a new earth.
It's going to be a new earth. It's going to take a bigger earth. When you look at how big that city is, it's going to take a bigger planet to hold it. Otherwise, it's going to be sticking up out of the atmosphere.
That'd be cool.
Okay.
But you know, the thing is that he's got this thing sewed up. We're on the winning side. In the end, Jesus wins. And we always, you know, Satan thinks because he's moving through time linearly, he thinks that there's absolutely a chance that he's going to win when Jesus comes back. But Jesus is, and that's why the cross is the ultimate singularity in space-time. It can affect time before the cross, it can affect time after the cross, because eternity held on the cross. But that same God is already in the millennial reign. He's already on the other side of the great battle. He's already on the other side of all this. And have you ever seen charts where they, you know, when you start learning temporal mechanics, you know, you make a decision, it can alter and create an alternate timeline, and it goes down here. And the next thing you know, it looks like a root system that you can't even see the board on.
Yeah.
We program that way in software.
With God, it's one straight line, because any decision that you and I make, or Lucifer makes, or anybody else, cannot affect his timeline. It's a singular timeline.
This is all in the series Loki, by the way, if people want to see it all graphed out and with cool graphics.
But he's filled all that singular timeline, because it's even the war itself isn't about man, it's about God's throne, it's about God's dominion. We get to be a part of the player. And so from God's perspective, it's already a done deal.
That's such a great reminder, because I think we can get really worked up over what's happening today. We can get worked up over 1,000 things that have very little significance in the grand scheme of things. And, you know, as much as we love studying, all four of us love studying the end times, it's fascinating. God gave us all these really cool, juicy details to dig into. And yet at the end of the day, he's already won. He's already done it. There's a great song by Shane and Shane, I'm fighting a battle you've already won. And it's a great song, because it's like, oh yeah, God already won the battle. We're just now having to go through it. You know, we're having to you know, make our way through this thing called life, because we're growing, we're learning, we're discovering, but God has already got it all figured out. There's nothing that's gonna throw him for a loop and like, oh my gosh, I didn't see that one coming. You know, like
that's why we need to trust him. And there's two aspects to cover. You know, everybody knows about getting saved, but I think when we find our kingdom purpose and we totally yield to that purpose, it's like a secondary covenant kicks in where there's protection and a fresh anointing that you have. And I think that's one of the things the remnant's discovering in this day and this hour is when I can lay everything I want down and I put it at his disposal because I'm going to love him with everything I am, everything that I have. And I am committed to his purpose in the earth. And if that's teaching Bible, that's great. If that is being a honorable contractor and I'm teaching men how to be men and how to be good fathers and husbands, and I'm doing that kingdom thing and yielding to that call of God and being faithful to that secondary covenant that's built off the first one. There's a lot of other things that kick in for promises of God that I think that's why we see with the remnant they have greater protection, that they have greater provision from God because they've kind of gone to the next level that we see in many of the patriarchs.
Like you said, Dr. Lake, there's some that are, they might be young that are just having families. I mean, their primary responsibility for, if you're a man, is to your wife and your children, and to be in community with other brothers and grow and disciple and be in discipleship and disciple
Learn how
your
to be a
own
man
son.
of God. Learn how to be a man of God, because today we can't even define what a man is, much less what a man of God is.
So that's my friends Curtis Reed and Michael Oman that have River Shabbat. I mean, that's their main focus of their ministry now is not everybody's going to be a teacher, not everybody's going to be an evangelist, not everybody's going to be called into full-time ministry, but you can lead your household. You can walk this out with brothers. You can, like Doug and I, like today, we got into a little quibble over something that means nothing. I mean, again, it's just us being little quibblers over something that in the big scheme of things, it means nothing. And I do believe that's part of walking this out, is learning how to differ on these minor issues. That's why I hate to do calendar wars or discussions at all, because they and we got into one today and I'm like, oh, why did I even, I'm like, stop, stop it. Don't even rise to the bait. Stop. So.
We're talking about finding our kingdom purpose, as we're ending with all this. I always wondered, you have in the book of Revelation, the great white throne judgment. Okay, your name is not in the Lamb's book of life. It's been blotted out. Why in the world pull up the other books? It's like, okay, do not pass go, do not collect $200. You're going in the lake of fire. And there's nothing why pull up the other books? I believe that from the beginning of time, God had a specific purpose and plan for Mike Lake. And it's in that book of, this was the life that I had for you. And for those at the great white throne judgment, when they rejected Jesus, they rejected that life. They didn't have access to it. They had no covenant. They had nothing. And I think the one of the last things that is a part of their judgment, they're going to see what they could have had and what they could have done if their names had not been blotted out. And I even think for the believer, the Apostle Paul said, listen, all of us are building on this thing, and God's judgment is going to come, and the things that we do because we just want to is wood, hay, and stubble, and the things that God has called us to do is going to be purified, become gold, silver, and precious gems, by the way, which are that's what's going to make the crowns that we have. Mm-hmm. And you're going to get to hold it just long enough to be able to cast it at his feet. Mm-hmm. And so, one of the things I've told my students for years is your whole life's goal is at that moment when you throw that crown at Jesus' feet, you want it to be a big thud, not sound like a little tinkle, tinkle, tinkle. Okay. Well, boom. Okay. Because I got me out of the way and I let you live through me. And Jesus, look and see what you have done in my life because I yielded to you. And I think when we begin seeing life that way, it transitions us from casual Christianity to remnant lifehood.
Dr. Lake, there's a harvest coming, probably soon, and you're preparing for that harvest. How are you preparing to be a part of the harvest?
I'm rearranging things. I'm actually in the process of merging the seminary. We have Biblical Life College and Seminary with a larger university system to where that's off my plate. so that I can spend the rest of my years just teaching Bible and writing books. I'm officially next month going on Medicare, so that makes me an old dude, okay? And so I'm looking at legacy at this part of my life, that I'm looking at doing videos, doing podcasts, and writing books. And my greatest desire is that this generation that's coming up after me, that they're going to be able to stand on my shoulders and take everything to the next level, to be able to fight the fight before Jesus comes back.
Wow. Where can people find more of your stuff and the Shinar Directive?
It's at kingdomintelligencebriefing.com is our major hub. Anytime we do a new video or anything, it's always posted there.
Kingdomintelligencebriefing.hub, you said.
.com. Or you can just type in drmichaellake.com, because the other one's longer than mayonnaise, okay? But yeah, that's our major hub. And God has just been putting on my heart to disposition a lot of things, just so that that I can spend all my time researching and writing and seeing guys raised up to take everything to the next level.
God bless you on the research and writing. I love people like you. I like to read your research, and I like to read your writing. So,
Dr. Lake,
I can't stand to write.
We're told that we can't come to the wedding naked or wearing dirty clothes. And it talks about clean clothing and things like that throughout Revelation. What do you think that means?
Well, the book of Revelation says that our white robes are the righteous acts of the saints.
Right.
It's us returning back to the commandments of God that are being lived by the power of the Holy Spirit's on the inside of us. Okay. And there's when you're spirit filled and you understand the commandments of God and you keep the balance as Jesus being the prototype, you become a force to be reckoned with, and the kingdom of hell hates to see you coming. That your prayers are answered, that you can and you're sensitive enough to God, you know when to turn left, to turn right, or to go straight, because you're listening to God. And you break out of and sometimes when people get in Hebraic heritage too, it's awful easy to get into the routine of the way that they do things, and it needs to be Christ-centric. And I've even discovered with the cycle of the feast, every time we go through them each year, God has something specific he wants to bring out in it, because it's a sanctification process for us. And all of that's a part of he's coming back for a bride who's without spot and a wrinkle or any such thing. And I want to be clothed in his righteousness, because I got to the place where he could live out his righteousness through me in the earth while I was still living in the earth. And I think that's the task of every believer. That's our testimony.
I would agree, and especially this time of year, it's an appointed time. It's the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It's not just about removing the physical leaven. The physical points to the weightier, but I believe this is a time of reflection every year. What leaven do I have? What traditions of men? What leaven sin do I still have? Pray about that. I believe that 7 days is times when prayer can be answered, and God can show you what strongholds you still may have not given up, what things are that you still need to release to him to give up in your own life, whether it be a tradition, whether it be, it could be a hobby, it could be something that he wants you to let go. And I'm like, no, please don't let it be fishing or hunting, but
I think there's I personally I see three seasons of introspection. Okay, I make sure that all the leaven of Babylon's out of my life, because it will sneak back in over the year if you're not careful. Okay, sometimes it can be just a bad attitude, and next thing you know, here comes the leaven of the mystery religions back in. And so this time's getting the leaven out. Shavuot is a time of making sure that nothing stops the fire. Okay, I want the fire of God. Mm-hmm. As I go through the 10 days of awe, it's making sure that I'm right with God and man. And so each one of those should be learning experiences. And if we just do it by rote, you miss the beauty of what God's trying to do. It's all about bringing us closer to Christ and making us more like him. You know, all of us, you know, what everybody asks, you know, what am I destined to be? I can tell you exactly what you're destined to be. The Apostle Paul said it. You are destined to be conformed into the image of him. And that's what the feasts are about. That's what our Christian growth is about. It's all about being conformed into the image of Christ.
Amen. Wow. Well, this was really, really awesome. I'm so glad that we got to dig in and explore some of the giants, Nephilim stuff, and a whole bunch more. So thank you, Dr. Lake, for joining us. We very much appreciate it. Tell us one more time where people can find your stuff.
Yeah, kingdomintelligencebriefing.com, or just type in drmichaellake.com. It'll take you to the same website.
Awesome. Thanks again. Everyone, God bless you, and we will see you next week. Take care.
God bless.